What's up, guys? So first I want to apologize for not uploading anything in about a week. Been a very busy one for me, especially with the 4th of July being yesterday. Hope you all had a very fun, safe, and happy holiday. But you know what? I got a fresh haircut, got some color in my cheeks. Now let's talk about a movie. One that many of you have probably not seen yet. Won't You Be My Neighbor is a documentary that tells the story of Fred Rogers, more famously known as Mr. Rogers, and the story behind his show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and why he did exactly what he did with his show. Now I'm going to tell you guys right now, I'm really not a big fan of documentaries. I usually don't care for the subject matter that a lot of documentaries focus on, and most of them just bore me to sleep. I'm also not someone who knows a whole lot about Mr. Rogers. I knew he run the TV show Won't You Be My Neighbor, but that was definitely before my time, so really, I wasn't one of the kids that really did grow up with him. But this documentary was definitely getting a lot of really positive response from a lot of people who saw it. So I had me feeling I should see it. And I gotta say, after watching it, having thought about it for a little while, this is probably one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. What this documentary really focuses on is basically what Mr. Rogers was trying to accomplish with his show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Because, you know, he would see what kids would watch on TV, he would see what TV would teach kids, and, you know, he's thinking, kids aren't getting anything from this. Kids should be gaining something from the TV that they watch. So that's when he decided, after he became an ordained minister, that he was going to develop a TV show called Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And on this show, he would teach kids about life, about things they face, things they might feel. But what I immediately appreciated seeing in this documentary with Mr. Rogers is the way he talked to kids. I mean, it's clear, the way you might talk to an adult is probably going to be very different the way you would talk to a kid. With Mr. Rogers, though, that was never the case. He would talk to kids the same way he would talk to adults. Because where some adults may feel that, oh, you need to talk more simple to a kid so they'll understand you more, Mr. Rogers always felt that, no, kids can understand when adults are talking to them. You just need to help them along the way. You need to help them understand. He never felt that just because he was an adult that he was superior to kids. He always saw them as his equal, and you can see right out the gate, that's why kids were able to warm up so easily to him. But what was also very wise with Mr. Rogers in his show is the fact that he knows that him being on a show, talking to kids about life, wasn't going to interest many of them. He knew that if he was going to get his subject matter across to kids, it had to be in a way that was going to appeal to them. And that's why I really appreciate seeing how the Imagination Land played such a big part in his show. You know, showing him working with puppets, working with these other characters. It shows exactly how he was able to get across to kids. But even more so, it's in this documentary, learn about the different puppets, these characters that he created, and what that essentially meant to his life. The people in the documentary, they talked about in particular, there was one puppet he always had. It was this little tiger named Danny that he would work with to interact with kids, use on the show. And what the people in the documentary pointed out was that tiger named Danny was basically the perfect representation of Mr. Rogers' own childhood. The way he made Danny talk, the way he made Danny act, the way he made Danny respond towards characters and kids that he would meet. You really do see a kid in that, because he realizes sometimes for kids, it's easier to hear things coming from a character, a puppet, or something like that, than maybe it is to hear it from an adult. It allows kids to warm up to him more, and it allows kids to listen more. It's something I definitely give Mr. Rogers a lot of credit for. He really understood how kids processed things. But I gotta say, where I really applaud Mr. Rogers was the fact that he was not afraid to talk to kids literally about anything. He was not afraid to teach them about things that maybe some TV shows and some adults would maybe, you know, take a step back from teaching kids about. They showed how in his show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, they talked about, you know, your pet dying, what death is. They talk about what divorce is. Look at a lot of the educational TV shows for kids. I honestly can't remember any that would touch on that kind of subject matter. I think a lot of it's because they feel that kids aren't able to understand that, kids aren't old enough to understand that. Mr. Rogers was like, no, they can understand it. We just need to help them along the way in understanding it. They have just as much a right as adults do to understand what the subject matter is. Because honestly, you talk about, you know, your pet dying or your parents getting divorced. These are things that could very well happen to kids, and he felt it was important that they were prepared for something like this along the way if it came to that. He wanted to get kids ready for the challenges and the obstacles that they would face in life, and I so admire him for that. He would even talk about things that happened in the news in a way that kids would understand, like the assassination of JFK. But there was one news event in particular that this documentary really touched on, It was a moment where these white people and these black people were just hanging out in this jacuzzi, in this pool, and a white man, a very racist white man, came by, started pouring like cleaning chemicals into the pool while these black people were in it, because he was very against white people and black people sharing something. So what Mr. Rogers did in one of his episodes is you see him just sitting in a chair, soaking his feet in a little kiddie pool, and one of these characters who was black, he comes on to the show, you know, he's talking to Mr. Rogers, and Mr. Rogers is like, hey, why don't you join me? Come stick your feet in this, it's nice. And you know, the character, he was like, okay, yeah, sure, why not? You know, they're just both sitting down, soaking their feet in a kiddie pool, and just enjoying each other's company. Right there, Mr. Rogers sent a message, not just to kids, but to really everyone, just saying, hey, look, world, we are two people of two different races, just sharing a pool, enjoying each other's company, and talking about life. And everything's okay. It was Mr. Rogers' way of teaching kids, hey, just because a person may not be just like you, they are still a person just like you are. It was honestly a moment that really moved me when I was watching it, because you see right here that Mr. Rogers wanted to teach love, acceptance, and embracing to the world. And that's where I really gotta give this documentary credit. It really brings the feels. Just so many moments, seeing what he would do with kids, seeing how his cast members would talk about him, seeing how the people who worked with him would talk about him, and just even looking back on some of the older moments of his show, seeing what he would do for some of these kids. There's one moment, there was this child who was paralyzed, I believe from the neck down, stuck in a wheelchair, brings him onto the show, talks to him about paralysis, they sing a little song together. It's just such a sweet moment when you watch it. I mean, my throat was nodding up, my eyes were welling up, I'm just like, wow, this is getting to me. And ultimately the biggest thing I took away from this movie was, we will never, ever, ever get someone like Mr. Rogers ever again. Someone who cared so much about children, to teach them what life was about, to teach them the things that they need to know along the way. Someone who so wanted peace in the world, wanted acceptance in the world, wanted there to be love in the world. Because honestly, you look at what the world is today, there's really a lot of hate, there's a lot of prejudice, there's a lot of people judging one another for, I don't know, who they are as people, how they act as people, things they might do. It really makes me wish Mr. Rogers was here right now, because if he was, he would probably be doing something about it. He would bring a little bit more positivity into this world. I think that's exactly what this movie did. It really brought some positivity into our times right now. It's one of the more feel-good movies I've seen in quite a while. So all in all, Won't You Be My Neighbor? It was such a moving film. It's amazing to see what Mr. Rogers really did to help kids, to teach them. It was really amazing to see how much of an impact he had on people's lives, you know, what he taught people, how he helped people. Seeing the way his family would talk about him, his co-workers would talk about him, kids that grew up watching him would talk about him. Of seeing the way he worked with kids, how he was able to understand them, how he treated them as equals. And then we just bring so much heart, so much emotion. I seriously did not expect it to hit me the way it did emotionally. Is this a movie I'm gonna watch a whole lot? No, it won't be. Granted, it's a documentary. They're not supposed to be. I mean, if I'm ever hanging out, wanting to watch a movie, or if I'm ever having a movie night with my friends, this probably isn't the movie that I'm immediately going to choose. But I will say, if I ever needed my spirits lifted, if I wanted to feel inspired, this is definitely a movie I would watch, and I would recommend everyone see it. And in the end, the best way I can describe Won't You Be My Neighbor is this. It may not have been the movie we've been asking for, but it's definitely a movie we need right now. So that's all I gotta say, guys. Thank you so much for watching my video. Don't forget to leave a comment, like, subscribe. I will see you all next time.